And welcome back to the First and Goal podcast. My name is Lewis. Next to me, as always, my beautiful co-host Laraib. As we are here to break down Week 2 of the 2025 NFL season, Laraib, a ton of awesome games went down. Not as exciting as Week 1, but like we talked about going into Week 2 in our last episode, we learned a lot about a lot of teams, and then some teams still got a lot of questions that we still need to figure out, but a lot to unpack and get into in today's episode. But of course, we have to start with the picks. So, Laura, I'll let
Mm.
you kick it off with that one.
Let me just go ahead and get those pulled up for you guys here. I eke out with a tiny victory over Lewis by one whole game. And you saw me here last week, I lost both my fantasy leagues. I lost in the picks, but law of averages, baby. I won both my fantasy leagues and I beat Lewis in the picks. That's just how it is in the NFL. It's competitive. What can I say? My biggest pick of the week was the Seahawks. I just had a feeling that offense would bounce back. And then, of course, Caleb Johnson with the here, bro, damn touchdown to
Bro.
really seal the deal for my Seahawks. The Jacksonville Jaguars let me down kind of, but really didn't matter. Of course, the Eagles were also a big pick, but I'm very happy with my week 2 performance.
Yeah, I'm not even too upset at my picks because ultimately, I mean, I should have lost that Cincinnati pick if it wasn't for, I don't even know, the Jaguars just collapsing on themselves. In retrospect, I mean, the Steelers. Woo! I don't know if we're gonna get to them in today's episode, but I don't even want to talk about them. Oh man, that game infuriated me. And then the Chiefs, we will talk about them, so unload on them earlier. But both our locks hit, both our upsets missed. So we're gonna get one of these upsets soon, Larav. It's been a while since we've hit on a good upset recently. Hopefully, I will start that trend this upcoming week. But before we talk about next week, let's go ahead and we'll start with last night's Monday Night Football doubleheader. Just full transparency here. I always last year and years past, I'm like, I hated the doubleheader because they overlapped and it was hard to, they're like if I want to watch it in double screen, right? Like on YouTube TV, they do the multi-view. And if I want to watch, they love to just, oh, and here's what's going on in this game. So now I'm watching the same game on two different. It was always super confusing. So the NFL strategy was like, all right, what we'll do is we'll have one game kick off at 6 and the next game kick off at 9. So it's 10:30, halftime isn't even started yet. And I got an early morning, Larob. I'm not sitting around waiting on this game to finish. I think it finished around 1 o'clock Eastern time. I mean, for my Eastern time people, brutal. But fortunately, next week that is not the case. But double headers of Monday Night Football, figure it out. I think I prefer this if I wasn't, waking up so early in the morning. Anywho, Laurab, let's go ahead and start with the first game. Tampa Bay pulls off another fourth quarter comeback to win and go 2-0 against the Texans. Biggest takeaway for me here is just the resiliency of Baker Mayfield, is always finding a way to win. And we were watching that game, we were talking to each other as it was going down, and really just the Buccaneers, like when you saw that they had the ball with 3 timeouts left, you have a confidence in Baker Mayfield that he's just gonna get it done. Like, no matter what, no matter the situation, he had the ball, he had the poise, and they still had 2 timeouts left when they ended up punching it in with Rashad White at the very end. So, big takeaway for me is I'm just super impressed with the mettle of this Bucks team. And a big thing that we really don't talk about that much is continuity in the NFL. It's these guys who've been with each other for a long time. Now, new offensive staff in Tampa Bay, but keeping it from the Baker and oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the head coach's name right
Todd
now.
Bowles,
And Todd Bowles
Vontae David,
combo.
the old dinosaur in town.
Yeah, Todd Bowles, I wouldn't say he's a favorite amongst Buccaneers fans, but he could consistently put together good defenses with, let's just be honest, mediocre defensive talent. And he just, develops very well. And they always compete on that side of the ball. And when you have a quarterback like Baker Mayfield who instills confidence in the offense and also brings that confidence to the defensive side of the ball, it propels them forward. They always come through in moments like this. And now you start the season two of your tougher road games all year long at Houston, at Atlanta, winning both those games. and they have a lot of easy games left in their schedule. So a potential Buccaneers number one seed in the NFC is definitely in play this season. And also sneaky, a Baker MVP case is being built right now. So my biggest takeaway was the Buccaneers are ready to make a big run this NFL season.
Yeah, and let me just flip it on over to the other side. And the Texans, who are 0-2 now, had two very tough games against the Rams and the Buccaneers. And the big thing has been their offense, right? CJ Stroud in year three has just continued to regress and regress and regress. And you could say, it's because of the lack of talent offensively. Offensive line has been horrible. Outside of Nico Collins, they don't really have anyone else to throw the ball to. But what you see out of CJ Stroud is just untimely sacks, bad balls, honestly, even when the pocket is clean, and just a rushing game that has been underwhelming to say the least. And overall, defense can only take you so far in this league nowadays. You have to rely on some firepower offensively, especially in a game like this. We've seen this change in the NFL now for the past couple of years now, where the nerds and the numbers guys have really said fourth down, fourth and short, we got to go for it. That's just today's NFL. It's crunch time. You're a couple minutes left in the fourth quarter. You're on the opposing side of the field. It's 4th and 3. It's 4th and 2. It's 4th and 1. You got to go for those situations and you got to convert. And the Texans just have not been able to do that. This week, last night, and then last week against the Rams, it's just execution has been horrible for this team. And now you're sitting in division with the Colts, who we'll talk about in a little bit, but things are starting to look grim for this team. Now they do get Christian Kirk back next week. Joe Mixon hopefully will be making an appearance sometime this season. But it might be time to hit the panic button in Houston.
Yeah, I agree with you that things are, a big comp that a lot of people had for CJ Stroud as a pro is Jared Goff. And I find that a very apt comparison because within a proper system with good supporting cast, they can reach a very high ceiling level. CJ Stroud is a very accurate, poised quarterback, but if his confidence is shaken, if he's feeling a ton of pressure, he's just not going to perform at the level you need him to perform to really compete with some of the bigger dogs in the AFC at the quarterback position. And we saw it in this game, like you mentioned, just feeling a lot of pressure, not feeling confident to step up in his throws. And the bigger concern for me is really this lack of running game. I mean, we saw them just get rid of Laramie Tunsil in the offseason, which, you could say, hey, bold move there, but they want to get younger. They want to, really build around Stroud. But offensive line was their biggest issue this year. It seems like CJ Stroud is lacking that confidence to really feel comfortable in the pocket and to, step into throws and make confident decisions. And that is a concern for me. We'll see what happens if Joe Mixon can come back at some point this season and bring a little more juice to this running game. Because right now, I mean, yeah, Nick Chubb had that touchdown run at the end of the fourth quarter, but you're really not getting a lot of that rushing attack. And if he's not able to work out a play action, it's a lot of just him having to be confident in that offensive line. And if anything, you got to just learn how to take a hit and make a pass, right? You have to know, this ball needs to get delivered now. I'm gonna take a hit. It's gonna be okay. I just didn't deliver it. And right now, it's a confidence thing with CJ. So we'll see if he can start to figure that out. And then, Laraib, let's go ahead and move over at the other game. The Chargers win 20-9 over the Raiders. Like I mentioned, I didn't catch much of this, but I'll start with the Raiders on this one. Um, Not a terrible showing. I think I want to focus on them defensively. Pete Carroll, defensive coach, for all of his, blunders towards the end of his Seahawks regime that maybe you'd want to touch on. I think he does still bring that defensive energy, and he can get a lot out of a lot of guys on the defensive end. And what we looked at is a pretty suboptimal defensive grouping of guys. You saw defensive tackle Christian Wilkins just get released right before the season starts. Still hasn't gotten picked up, by the way. Where we were really concerned about this front seven, but rushing defense has been pretty outstanding so far. They're in the top five in rushing yards per game. Obviously, small sample size, but playing the Patriots, playing the Chargers, two teams who have decent offenses, who we've seen rush the ball better in their other games. So that's a good thing for me to see. Bigger problems offensively. Not really seeing it from Genty so far. I know it's only two games, but not seeing a ton of juice, just not really breaking any runs. Yeah, he can fight for some tough yards here and there, but you need that next level of burst. And some guys have it, some guys don't. I just have not seen that from Ginty breaking through the second level and making guys miss in the open field to really have these 20 plus yard runs, these 30 plus yard runs. Because in today's NFL, with these safeties playing so far away and the threat of the deep pass is the biggest, weapon in the NFL, you need to be able to establish a run game. And so far, Ginty really isn't making defenses pay that much. Um, but I think the Raiders will be fine. This is a tough match for them. I think they will bounce back from this. I like what they have going for them. I just think they're facing a Chargers team that's peaking at the right time.
I want to talk about their offense a little bit and Geno Smith. This is kind of the peaks and valleys that, I was kind of used to seeing when he was in Seattle. They play the Patriots week one, he throws for 300 yards. Everything looks amazing. And then the next week, he throws three interceptions in an awful game on prime time. And I mean, the word red zone zombie, I know throws
Mm.
a lot of fear into the hearts of Saints fans. But that's what Geno Smith was. He was a red zone zombie, and it wasn't really talked about last year. The amount of interceptions that he had when the Seahawks were in the red zone, and we saw that in this game, right? Just a lot of balls that really should not have been thrown. On the first drive of the game, in the first couple plays, there was an interception. Wasn't it in the red zone, but that was just quick 3 points for the Chargers. And so that's just what you have to live with when you have Geno Smith. And a big thing is also Brock Bowers is injured. He has that big old knee brace on his left leg. And that's just a whole element that you take out of their offense. And so we'll see what they continue to do. But you mentioned that their defense was playing really outstanding in this game, and that was one big highlight. And then on the other side, the Chargers, Justin Herbert, not the greatest game out of him. Hit QJ on a huge 60-yard bomb, but this is another thing. The peaks and valleys. One week will look outstanding, and in another week, not that great of a performance. Could have had an interception that could have been really costly late in the game, but it ended up being dropped. And then another thing, the rushing attack for this team. Last week we said, okay, you're playing against the Chiefs, we can excuse you a little bit. But this week, when you're playing against the Raiders, and like you mentioned, maybe not the greatest front seven besides Max Crosby and Divine Diablo, it really wasn't that impressive. Does he play for the Falcons, Diablo?
No, he's a Raider. He's a Raider.
He's a
You got
Raider?
that
Okay,
right.
I'm just making
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, just not the greatest rushing attack. And, all the news is on Genty because he was a top 10 pick, but Omarion Hampton, maybe not the greatest flasher ever. But, what a game we thought was going to be just a huge explosion really turned out to be a stinker, but Chargers move on to 2-0.
Yeah, I would just, to hit on that, obviously that's a huge point of emphasis for a Jim Harbaugh team. He wants to establish the run. Offensive line is the tip of the spear. That's his famous quote. He prioritized offensive line. Obviously it sucks losing Rashawn Slater in the preseason, but you still have a lot of talent on offensive line. And so for them really not to be more successful in that. The bigger concern for me, and we'll talk about this when we talk about Kansas City as well, is it just, Herbert led the team in rushing last night. And whenever I see these quarterbacks who have had problems with health in the past, Herbert, not really anything too major, same with Mahomes, but when you're putting a ton of pressure on them to consistently lead their team in rushing, to do a lot, take extra hits, especially this early in the season, it just always makes me wince as a football fan seeing these just quarterbacks take these big nasty hits when it's like, they get right back up. They're the, leaders of the team. They want to show they're tough, but man, like slide, like stop taking these hits. And I just, there's a lot of quarterbacks already going down with injuries early on in the season. So big storyline. For how well Herbert played in week one and, what we think we can get out of him in this year with Harbaugh in year two with Harbaugh, that it just seeing these hits, they really need to establish this running game. They need to get more from Omarion Hampton that they spent a first round pick on, just to avoid these early season hits on the quarterback. But Laraib, today the theme of the episode is 2-0 teams versus 0-2 teams. And a big thing, I had you pull up the stats for me, my stat guy over here. 2-0 teams since 2020. The reason I bring that up is because that is when the NFL expanded to a 7-team playoff for each conference. 2-0 teams, 78% chance to make the playoffs after a 2-0 start versus 0-2 teams, just a 12% chance. Now, I think I saw something, I don't know how correct this is, but if you kind of filter through that with saying, hey, out of the 0-2 teams, let's look at the teams who were just, minus odds to make the playoffs before the season started. I think that is more of like a 40% chance those teams end up making the playoffs. So sometimes it's schedule, sometimes it's a weird injury to start the year. And that's what the point of this exercise is, right? So we're going to look at all the 2-0 teams and we're going to decide which teams out of that, maybe the more fraudulent, you're not buying a start, or you just need to see more in general. And then we're going to look at some of these 0-2 teams like, hey, may not look great now, but there's optimism. There's a reason that you can look forward to the rest of this season. So let's start with the 2-0 teams, Laura. Out of the bunch, and I'll list them off real quick for our listeners. Um, Out of the bunch of the teams, you have the Packers, you have the Bills. Um, Excuse me, let me just get it up real quick. Yeah, so you have um, the Packers, the Bills, the Colts, the Niners, the Bengals, the Eagles, the Chargers, Buccaneers, Cardinals, and the Rams, Laraib. So out of that list, which team on here is the sketchiest to you?
The sketchiest team has to be the Cardinals for me. I know you'll touch on another one in a second, but the Cardinals got to play the Saints in a one-score game in week one, got a scare from the Panthers in week two here, and just a leap that we thought Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. were taking this year too just has not been there in these games, and especially their defense, right? I know they were up pretty big on the Panthers, and it was a 9 points going into the fourth quarter. But when it's crunch time and you got to put the game away, you got 50-year-old Calais Campbell having to step up on the final drive. You lose the onside recovery. That could have turned nasty real quick. And when you're playing one of the two worst teams in the NFL, and the Saints and the Panthers, and you don't convincingly beat them, I think I have a lot of questions for that team.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of that, obviously I was pretty keyed in on that first game with the Cardinals. I'm not seeing it from Kyler Murray. Like it's just he has these spectacular wow scrambles where he's running all over the field, no one can get him, and he turns, mayhem into magic. But it's the routine stuff that makes you pull your hair out as a Cardinals fan. Watching him just miss open guys across the middle of the field. And we can say, oh, it's a inherent disadvantage to smaller quarterbacks. The middle of the field has always just been a big thing, right? But there's guys who put the time in. They watch the film study. Kyler Murray is the same height as Drew Brees, right? And Drew Brees is one of the best middle of the field passers I've ever seen in my entire life. And it really is just, getting reps with your guys and throwing with anticipation, and he's great at getting out of the pocket, but it's just once he's out of the pocket, it's hitting those tight windows. So I'm just not seeing it from him. And as he declines physically and athletically, knock on wood, you get a full season out of him just to start. But I'm just not seeing that same juice, really his rookie year, especially his second year in the NFL, that I want to see a progression at this point. So the Cardinals, I agree with you. And then, defensively, I think they're better defensively than they've been in years past. But also, I need to see more, against a legitimate NFL offense, not the Panthers and the Saints. There's really two teams here, Laura, that I see, and I'm just very skeptical of. The first one, I'll just say, is the Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of this is just due to the news we got about Joe Burrow's injury. Turf toe injury always has been a turf toe. It's like, damn, a toe injury is keeping you out. The injury itself is a lot more severe than the name suggests, right? It's total tendon ligament damage all throughout your foot. You're basically sidelined. They say 3 months. Knowing Burrow and knowing he is the face of this franchise and the cornerstone, to rush him back with this would be, malpractice, in my opinion. Now, we'll see where they're at in the season when the timetable's looking like he can make a return. If they're a competitive team, if Browning could get them to a good spot, let's say he's poised to come back week 15 because that's around the 3 month mark, right? And they're sitting around 500, maybe a game over, then maybe you try to give him a chance, see how he's feeling, speak with the medical staff. But this really feels like a season-ending injury. And as good as Browning, I wouldn't say even as good because he had some awful mistakes in that game. He's been competent as a starter. I think he has a live arm. He's been in the system for a while. You can only think he's gotten better in the time he's had. But with a lot of these backups, like they'll catch you by surprise, the first time they come in and maybe a game or two after that. But once you really start game planning for these guys, they fall off a cliff. And we saw that in 2022, I believe, with Browning. No, 23, when he took over for Joe Burrow. And man, like after those first four games where he looked pretty awesome, he fell off a steep cliff after that. Now you still have the outside talent, but you still have the same problems when Joe Burrow was the quarterback. I think I'd still put them in this category if Burrow was totally healthy right now because the offensive line kind of got worse from last year and they've been horrible. We saw Myles Garrett just demolishing them week one, and then the Jaguars were teeing off on Joe Burrow all game long. They have not been able to establish a run game whatsoever. And then you still have the lingering questions defensively. You haven't played the best offense in the NFL. So you can only imagine when you start playing your Baltimores, your Buffaloes, your, really stout offensive teams in the NFL, there's going to be big problems for you in that area. So Bengals are definitely on my fraud alert for the 2-0 teams. And then after that, it's the San Francisco 49ers. Similar reasoning. Uh Brock Purdy goes out and then Mac Jones comes in and looks more than serviceable. But man, this team has some serious defensive problems. That defensive backfield is just not sharp. Spencer Rattler, first time he's ever thrown more than 2 touchdowns in a game, and he had three. I mean, they could not guard the tight end whatsoever. And then just have guys falling in and out of the lineup week by week by week. We see in this game, two offensive linemen go down. You see, Juwan Jennings, he had an awesome touchdown. He had some plays, but hobbling off the field almost every single drive. Already you're missing George Kittle and Purdy. So it's just the injuries are just catching up to this team. It's just their snake bit. And yes, they have an easy schedule, easy, but eventually they're just going to fall apart to where they are the easy schedule for some of these other teams that are struggling. So, yeah, you beat the Saints and Mac Jones had a really strong second half of that game, but how much longer is he going to be able to? Because this next stretch of games you have going forward is a lot tougher than the start, and I am just pretty skeptical of the Niners.
Yeah, I want to go back to your point on the Bengals. I want to talk about their defense and how lucky they have been on being able to win those two games. They've just been absolutely decimated by running backs. You go back to week one, Dylan Sampson had over 60 receiving yards. And then this past game, Travis Etienne and Bashal Tutin both had receiving touchdowns as well. So I think they're just going to start to get eaten up by running backs, and that's just going to be really hard, especially for Jake Browning when he came in this game, just threw 3 picks right off the bat. This team could very easily be 0-2, and we could be talking about them in a different section. But yeah, a lot of question marks for them. And then, yeah, I agree with you, 49ers just starting to lose pieces this early into the season. It's just really, really concerning. But I want to move on to 2-0 teams who we like.
Well, real quick, there's unless you're going to bring them up here, I'll let you go. I'll let you go.
2-0 teams that we like. Of course, we got the big names out there, the Bills and the Packers. Everyone likes them. But I want to talk about our third NFC West team. I want to talk to Los Angeles Rams. I have been very impressed with the way their defense has been playing. Matthew Stafford, with all the questions that we had during the offseason, he's come in, he's looked healthy. He's been producing in big moments in these games. And I've been really impressed, especially for a Rams team. Like we talked about it earlier in the season, they kind of start off slow, right? In the Sean McVay offense. They don't really play much of their starters in the preseason. But I've been really impressed by the way they've been playing football. The 49ers and the Cardinals are all 2-0 as well. But I really like what I've seen out of the Rams, and I think they can continue to build on that.
Yeah, I really do like the Rams. Stafford looks healthy right now. He looks good. I don't love this rushing attack. I mean, I'm a Kyrie Williams guy just by happenstance. I have to kind of root for him. Blake Corum got some burn in the last game, so they're trying to, revitalize that backfield because that's a big thing. Stafford, McVay, as much as he had these high-powered passing attacks, he does want to establish the run. He wants to get a consistent running game going, but the offense looks dynamic. Devontae Adams looks really good in this system. Now, I'd like to see them up against a better offensive team to really put them underneath that pressure. But I mean, it's the Rams, it's Stafford, it's McVay. You have that inherent trust in the team. And a team I'd like to highlight. We did talk about the Chargers and the Bucks when we did Monday Night Football, so I want to give them their flowers. I'm going to bring up the Colts here, and I'm not saying I like them because I was interested that neither of us brought them up in the last segment, right? Because it is Daniel Jones. And right, and we've seen Daniel Jones play miserable football year after year after year in New York. And now Indiana Jones is taking the league by storm. And I don't really think this Colts team is a contender. I don't think they're that level of playoff team, but I think they are a playoff team. I really do like the talent on this team. And offensively, they haven't punted all season long. They haven't had a turnover all season long. So Daniel Jones is just hitting. They have a lot of playmakers. I like Pittman. You bring in the rookie Tyler Warren, who's really been explosive for this offense. Jonathan Taylor is still a stud, and they did lose some offensive line pieces, but maybe that offensive line just needed a competent quarterback behind it to just deliver to guys, get the ball out quick, run the offense. Daniel Jones, I mean, talking about quarterbacks taking hits, he takes some of the most violent hits I'll ever see a quarterback take, but he bounces right back up. I guess he's used to taking hits from this time in New York, but um, he looks really good to start the season. Now, will this continue? A lot of people are bringing up last year's 2-0 Saints as like, I mean, they look good. They're undeniably beating teams and their offense looks good. What are we to make of this? And then the Saints tailed off. A lot of that, though, was purely based off injuries, right? So Shane Steichen has proven he's a really good offensive coach. This defense still leaves some to be desired. You're not playing these awesome offenses with the Dolphins and the Broncos in back-to-back weeks, but they're not really going to face a ton of awesome offenses all year. So if Daniel Jones can stay healthy and just stay reliable, I think this team is in a really good position to not only compete for this division title, but even just a playoff berth in general.
Yeah, some people are calling Daniel Jones Indiana Jones and Lucas Oil Stadium the Temple
Sick
of
name.
Doom.
Sick.
That might be it.
Aura. I
Um,
mean,
you trying to say something right now while I'm speaking?
go ahead.
No, okay, yeah, the Temple of Doom, Lucas Oil Stadium. But I really want to see what Indiana Jones looks like outside of his climate, outside of when all the, blue horseshoes are waving around in the stands. And one of that's some of that pressure really starts to get him when they start playing on the road. Like you mentioned, their supporting cast has been amazing. Tyler Warren is the best tight end Daniel Jones ever played with. Jonathan Taylor is the second best running back Daniel Jones has ever
Yeah.
played with. This receiving core, they have a lot of weapons, maybe not the household names that everyone knows, but Alec Pierce, Adonai Mitchell, Josh Downs, Michael Pittman Jr., those guys have all been schemed very well in the Shane Steichen offense, and it's all sort of gelled together here for Daniel Jones. But what we've seen I mean, this guy, he could be Derek Carr from first 2 weeks of last year, or he could be Sam Darnold from last year from the Vikings, the same exact tone, right? So it's kind of a look and see type of thing here. I don't want to cross him off. I don't want to, pencil him in yet. This is going to be one of the more exciting teams to talk about the next couple of weeks to see how they develop when they start playing some real teams. But for right now, I mean, I have to agree. The numbers are on their side, almost 80% chance at 2-0 to make it. You have the Texans not looking that sharp. The Titans 0-2 as well, and then the Jaguars, a lot of question marks there. We're not going to talk about them today, but a lot of effort questions and a lot of head coach, quarterback discussions being had over there. So it looks like the door is wide open for this Colts team.
All right, well, let's talk about some of these disappointing teams, Laura. Like we mentioned, 0-2 teams since 2020, only a 12% chance to make the playoffs. The 0-2 teams this season so far are the Kansas City Chiefs, the Texans, Saints, Jets, Dolphins, Panthers, Bears, Browns, Titans, and Giants, Laura. Now, obviously, I'll just pick the low-hanging fruit here. The 0-2 team that we expect to bounce back and to have a good season is obviously the Kansas City Chiefs, right? They're the best team that we've seen the past 5 years, consistently excellent, and they've been in both games with a chance to win and just have not been able to pull it through against two and 0 teams who we've said, yeah, those are good teams, right? We're not worried about those. So disappointing, obviously, but at some point, it's hard to look at this Chiefs team. We're really disappointed in them, but you have to separate what we're used to seeing from the Chiefs that versus the reality of the Chiefs now. The reality is that they're a team that's offensive line is young and still building. They have a lot of new pieces that they're trying to gel that just inevitably is going to take time, right? And then receiver wise, you lose Xavier Worthy on the first series of week one. Rashee Rice is suspended until week 7. So there's still a lot of stuff that you can look forward to and say, they're going to get these things back. Their offensive line is going to play better, and they're going to have a foundation moving forward that they're going to rely on. You still have Mahomes, you still have Andy Reid. All that being said, there are still legitimate concerns with this Chiefs team that make it hard for me to believe that they're going to reach their fourth straight Super Bowl in this season. Ultimately, it's my number one concern is this rushing attack. Can this offensive line gel and can these guys, get better holes, feast on better teams? They played two really good defenses, but Patrick Mahomes taking these hits, like I mentioned earlier, is very distressing because sometimes you'll see Mahomes in these big moments, these big playoff games, fourth quarter against the Niners 2 years ago in the Super Bowl, take off for massive runs. We see him in the conference championship game against the Titans a few years ago, rack off a massive touchdown run where it's like he really is a very underrated, lethal rushing quarterback, but he's very decisive on when he needs to run and when to protect himself. But this year, he's kind of had to realize we don't have the juice in the running game, and we don't really have the guys on the outside to threaten defenses. So I need to be a lot more of a weapon myself. And that concerns me early. And then, especially flipping over to the defensive side, they've been fine, but they're not really getting that pass rush. And ultimately, that can also be because they're not leading in a lot of these games. They're not putting that pressure on teams. They've been kind of trailing in games, so that pass rush hasn't been able to really tee off the way we're used to it seeing. But you're not getting the same juice from that pass rushing group that you've seen in years past. And that kind of shows the faults in the secondary. But you have Spagnola, you have Andy Reid, you have Patrick Mahomes. Continuity, they will be fine. I still think they're going to make the playoffs. They might not be a shoe-in for their division at this point, but I think the Chiefs will be fine.
Yeah, and it's kind of just been a flip on its head of what we've been expecting them to do in the past couple of years. They'll be down 10 points in the fourth quarter. The defense will get a huge stop, and then the offense gets the ball back, and here we go. We're off to the races. They find a way to win the game, here or there, neither there on a dubious call in
Mm.
some of those games.
They'll always have
But
the refs in their
it,
pocket.
it, it would have really been interesting to see what would happen for this team if they went 0-3, but of course, to get the Giants on Sunday Night Football, you would have really thought there would have been a more urgency from them if they do go down 0-3. Maybe they do go out and acquire a Tyreek Hill. Maybe they do go out and acquire a Zach
Alvin
Charbonnet.
Kamara.
If I had a dollar for every time Alvin Kamara was being traded to the Bills or the Chiefs, I would have a lot of money. But no, I agree. I mean, this Chiefs team will be fine. It's just we've seen it. We just gotta, see them get back on track.
All right, Laraib, is there another team in this 0-2 category that you look at with some optimism here?
My sleeper team that is 0-2, everyone is gonna hate me for this. It's the Chicago Bears with Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson. Hey, call me crazy. I'm in on Caleb Williams now.
You're not
Uh,
crazy.
I'm in on Caleb Williams. I'm in on this offensive line starting to gel a little bit. Listen, they lost an emotional game against the Vikings on opening Monday Night Football. Okay, we'll give them that one. They kind of fell apart offensively. And then this game against the Lions, we knew that this was a kitchen sink game for the Lions. They're going against Ben Johnson. They're gonna put Amon-Ra St. Brown in the game when they're up by 30 points to score more garbage time touchdown points. That's what the Lions were gonna do against this Bears team. Now, the pressure's sort of fallen off. The expectations have been quite lowered. I think when this group starts to gel, especially Roma Dunze, he's taken a huge leap in year two. I think I like what I saw offensively. They continue to start to gel a little bit more. Everyone's crossing them off, but I think there's some hope still left in Chicago.
Yeah, I agree with you. We knew this was going to take time, right? Ben Johnson, complicated offensive system, new offensive line. We saw the struggles in the preseason, but ultimately Ben Johnson took this job because he saw something in Caleb Williams that he could build and he could mold an offense around. And to say that, yeah, Caleb didn't play well in the second half against the Vikings, we can just be transparent about that. I don't think he played that bad last week. I just think the game got so out of hand so quickly against a desperate, super talented Lions team that ultimately you had to pivot, right? You had to, here we go. Now, week 3, looking ahead, this is a big game, but it does take a little bit of the pressure off. Hey, we're 0-2. It can't get much worse than this. They have the worst point differential in the league as of for the first 2 weeks at a minus 34, but they have the talent. The offensive line will gel. I do need to see more from this rushing game. DeAndre Swift has had some good moments so far, but I'd like to see a little bit more of that to kind of take the pressure off. And Ben Johnson, he's going to have good defensive schemes. Luckily, you're playing a defense in Dallas next week, and we'll talk about that in our preview. That is very gettable. So there's an opportunity for the Bears to wipe some stuff off their plate and have a good showing. Now's the time. Now, defensively, a lot more questions because JJ McCarthy didn't look that good against an Atlanta defense that we don't love. And then obviously we saw what the Lions did to them. So there's a lot of question marks defensively for that Dennis Allen led group. They still have the talent. There's guys missing in the secondary, but I agree with you. I think the Bears have optimism. It just the expectations were so high entering the season for this team that it was like, dang, like let's chill a bit. Like they're not all of a sudden going to vault the Lions and the Packers and a 14-win Vikings team from last season. Let's give this thing some time, and we'll see what happens from here. Let's see if the expectations break the Bears. 0-2 0-2 teams, Laraib, that started 0-2, and you're like, dang, I don't know. This might just get up. Besides the obvious, like neither of us thought the Panthers, Saints, Jets, and the Browns were going to do much this year. But is there a team on here where like you're 0-2 and it doesn't look like it's going to get any better?
And the obvious one staring everyone in the face is the Dolphins. We'll talk about them in a second, but it looks like they very well will be 0-3. Tyreek Hill looks like he wants to get out of town, and especially in a game where they had every opportunity in the world to win against the Patriots. I mean, my goodness. It's just so many questions, so much animosity. You have the plane flying around the stadium saying fire the GM, fire the head coach. Tua, I mean, every single time this guy gets up on the podium before a game, after a game, during the week, he's about to say some the dumbest shit you ever heard in your life.
Yes, confidence.
Um, I mean, it's just a team you don't know what the hell their future is going to be, and it's just bleak.
Yeah, I have not a lot to add to that. I think you hit it on. Just a team that clearly has the talent, right? They showed a lot of their offensive juice. I love Achan. When Tua's on, he's really good, but when he's off, man, is it a hard watch. And we're about to talk about them in their next matchup coming up here pretty soon, but it's not looking very good. And this, it gets really actually. I'll say that next part, but a team for me, we talked about them a bit to start. It's the Houston Texans, or it just I mentioned like not liking a lot of the things I'm seeing from Stroud early, and I do really like this defense. But now you have a team in the Colts who are looking pretty impressive in that division, and they have some tougher games. Obviously, playing a first place schedule. I'm not saying that they can't have a chance to win the division or make the playoffs, but this AFC is so deep that if for me, if this AFC, there won't be two AFC South teams in the playoffs. I really don't think that'll be the case. And the Texans' flaws are loud, and they're very showing. So a lot needs to get fixed pretty soon in Houston for me to want to believe that they can turn this thing around. Now they did. They were the first team to really make that 0-2 turnaround a few years ago. So it is possible, but it's hard for me to see it now.
Yeah, and then like you mentioned, the other teams 0-2, we're kind of just
Yeah.
they're not just gonna be mentioned that much for the remainder of the season.
Now the
Um,
Jets, the Jets made they were like, hey, after week one,
no, no,
you
no, no,
know,
I can't do
yeah,
that.
no, it's
The
over.
the Jets Steelers, that was the game, right? All the
Ugh.
60 points being scored. Ah, Aaron Rodgers is back. Justin Fields. Oh my goodness, we're
That
gonna
was
look
the
back.
fooled us game.
That was a big game from week one that we're gonna be looking at the end of season and be like, oh man, that
Wow.
one got
What
us.
the hell happened there? All
Yeah,
right, Laura. Well, let's go to Thursday night football. We have the aforementioned Miami Dolphins traveling to Buffalo to face the Buffalo Bills. Bills 11 and a half point home favorites. And what I was gonna bring up earlier, and I decided I'd bring it up now. Thursday night football. there's a long time between Thursday and the next time you're going to play a game. A lot of time for an owner and a general manager to really think about their season and everything. And if this game goes the way I assume we both think it's going to go. Now, I will say divisional game on a short week, 11 and a half is a lot of points, but the Bills are just so clearly the better team in this matchup all across the board. A team that's unified, a common goal, good vibes to start the season. I think they are going to win this game. Now, I'm going to pick the Dolphins to barely cover. I have the Bills winning 30-20 in this matchup. I just think that's a lot of points for the Bills to be favored by. But it's going to be a lot of time for them, those decision makers, to not only make decisions on the roster, like you mentioned, Tyreek Hill requesting a trade. His name's definitely hot on the block, but other guys on the roster too: Jalen Waddle, Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, Devon A. Chain potentially. A lot of things to be shaken up, but not only personnel decisions, but Mike McDaniel's got to be sitting there just chewing his fingernails off, knowing that he could be the first head coach fired if this game ends up in a utter just disgusting blowout.
The big thing I want to highlight in this game is the awful production from Thursday Night Football.
Oh,
Um, I hate Kirk Herbstreit just because I hate college football, but Al Michaels has was
oh,
such a huge part of my childhood,
wake up, Al.
and watching Sunday Night Football, him and Chris Collinsworth, that is something I'll remember till the day I die. But something else that needs to die is Al Michaels and his broadcasting career. He's just been awful. I mean, we could have excused it for the past 2 years, or especially since they switched to Amazon, 'cause they just had these awful games. I mean, the amount of Thursday night games we saw Russell Wilson and the Broncos play on Thursday night. All right, Al, I'll excuse you for those, but I mean, Romeo Dobbs, touchdown. I mean, can we have a little enthusiasm? We're watching football, man. That was just my little side note on that. But yeah, in this game for the Bills, now I want to say the same reason why I picked the Jets last week. The reason against the Bills is another reason why I want the Dolphins, or I think the Dolphins are going to cover. The Bills are due for a stinker. All these teams, not named the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Lions, the Bills, we all expect them to have stinkers throughout the season. And this is the huge blaring flashlights in my face. This is the stinker game. This is a stinker game. But there's no way in hell I could pick
No.
this Dolphins team. They, like you mentioned, it's just everything is just completely off. I mean, if they find a way to win this game, Mike McDaniel, you're a head coach in the National Football League for another week. But I just don't think that's going to happen. I think the Bills win at 31-21.
Yeah, this game it's gonna go one of two ways. It's gonna be a Dolphins reckoning or just delaying the inevitable. But we'll see. This could be a season turnaround. A divisional win on the road, guys getting bought in again. It could, juice up the entire locker room, especially against a marquee opponent in your division. But we're not gonna think that's gonna be the case
And
in
we're
this
and we're
one.
not that sharp,
We're not that sharp.
unfortunately.
I wish we were, but sometimes you get a little too sharp and end up cutting yourself. So, but Laraib, that's gonna do it for today's episode. A shorter one for y'all, but a lot of stuff
Was
that
it
I'm
that
happy,
short?
a lot of stuff that I'm happy we were able to hit on today. We're gonna be filming our week 3 preview on Thursday, so make sure you're looking out for that. A lot of, another full slate of games to get into. So super excited to break all of those down. But Rob, anything else you got for us before we get out of here today?
No, I think that's the First Go podcast signing off.
Peace.